Good afternoon, and welcome to this week's tarot reading, where we're going to be playing around with the question of when you find yourself in a moment of stillness, what helps you surrender and remain present? When I was looking at how to create the spread for this particular topic, I realized that I think there might be a kind of a misunderstanding or a misfire, I guess, around the idea of stillness, and that stillness needs to be something that is right or wrong, right? That a lot of times when you think of stillness, it kind of connects back to the idea of meditation and being able to sit still and just be in contemplation. The thing is stillness is something that is achievable at many different levels, I want to say. And that's actually not even how I think I really want to say it. What I'm trying to get at is that stillness, no matter how much you practice it, no matter how much you embrace it, it is still a challenge. It is still difficult. We look at kind of still life pictures and think that's what we're trying to achieve, this idea of being able to just be totally surrendered and in the moment, mind blank, different things that take up that kind of image of stillness. The thing is I think that stillness is something very different. Stillness is being able to be present while there's internal storms that are raging, while there's grief that's coming up, while there's to-do lists that are trying to be thought out, and understanding that even in this moment, with all of this stuff going on, I can still sit here and be present and breathe, and everything's going to be okay. One of the things when I was, getting ready for the reading that I was reminded of several years ago, I took this mindful meditation course. And the goal of the course was to be able to sit in mindfulness for about 40 minutes. And on the very first day, when they started practicing it, they said, okay, we're going to do 10 seconds. And I was like, 10 seconds? I can do that. Turns out 10 seconds of this stillness when you're living from a fight or flight based nervous system is extremely difficult. When you're sitting in the stillness, all of the signals that are going through your nervous system start to pop, and you start to wonder what's going to get me, right? Because stillness, me in some ways, to that nervous system means vulnerable. It means prey. It means something bad can get you. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why a lot of us spend our time filling every single moment that we have with sound, with movement, with something other than quietness, other than stillness. And it takes a lot of courage to be able to get to the point where you can sit knowing that what's going to greet you sometimes more than others is going to be that discomfort. And, when I did manage to finish the program, and I did, do my first 40-minute of stillness, it was still a challenge. It was still something that after a certain amount of time, my body started to want to switch into that more active nervous system of something must be wrong, right? Like if we're sitting here and we're not doing anything, eventually something's going to come up and it's going to be wrong and it's going to be our fault because we sat here and we did this. And so part of stillness is understanding that it is a learned skill. It is a skill that needs to be built upon. It is a skill where the trust doesn't necessarily come naturally. And building ourselves up to be like the grand gurus who can, stand in meditation in the middle of an ice cold waterfall and seem like nothing's bothering them. Um, I think one of my favorite cartoons that I ever saw was somebody that was doing that, and they had the thought bubble up, and the thought that was going through the guy's mind was, did I turn my oven off? Right? So I think we need to understand that even these people that have lived their whole lives doing this will have those moments where that anxiety, that worry, or the doubt will creep in. And so I think it's important for us to remember that it's not about getting that moment of stillness perfect. It's about understanding how we can be in that moment, no matter how imperfect it is, and still be still, if that makes any sense. So, the purpose for today's reading is to open up space for yourself to enter into a guilt-free moment of stillness. And sometimes that's all it takes is a moment. So, as I shuffle the question, which is what might help you surrender into stillness, we will take a nice moment of quiet as we do this. Okay, time to pick our cards. I was just thinking as I was pulling the cards, and it was taking a bit longer for the cards. They were, I think, playing with me to make sure that I stayed in that stillness as long as I needed to. But I was wondering, whoever's watching this, how are you feeling in that moment of stillness that we just had? All right. So the first question that we're asking today is where in your life are you being asked to embrace stillness? And I think stillness has multiple meanings to it. And what we're looking for today in our reading is the idea of stillness within a moment. And it can be a physical stillness where you're just standing still. It could be mental stillness. But I think that there's this understanding that needs to be happen that even when something appears still, there's still things going on. And the image that kind of pops into mind is the idea of a river that has a very still surface, but there's still a current going in underneath. There's still things that are moving around underneath. And that's what we need to understand, is that sometimes stillness has an appearance other than what it actually is. So where in your life are you being asked to embrace stillness? And wow, what a way to kind of kick this off. Here we have the Five of Coins. And the Five of Coins traditionally is this idea of lack, this idea of worrying about the resources, worrying about the money, worrying about security and safety. It to me is often one of the biggest triggers of our nervous system that connects to the root chakra. Because here we're looking at everything that is making the light shine, right? Like a lot of times, this one's a little bit different from the traditional image of somebody standing outside of the door of a church and the inside of the church is all lit up. And here you have the person outside in the cold. But this is someone who is sitting here looking at this one coin that they have. And yes, the other coins are glowing. But the thing is physically, this might be the only coin that this person has. And the stillness that is being asked for is to be able to sit with the understanding that maybe the resources, maybe the thing that you need to feel safe and secure comes from something non-tangible, right? Because coins, they're all about the physicalness. They're all about the tangible, the corporeal. And so when we look at and we base that on a number in our bank account, which ironically enough nowadays is more ethereal than it is corporeal, because a lot of times you're just looking at a number on a screen, and the money that's in there, the numbers that we're in there, will never actually hold in our hand. If you have $1,000 in your bank account, that'll always just be ones and zeros on a digital screen. It will never be the actual physical money that you hold in your hand and say, oh yes, I can count this $100 bills. And I know that I have it. So there's a lot of trust that is actually being called for at this point. And so looking at your life and asking, like, where do I need to embrace this stillness? It's where with the idea of the Five of Coins, are you worrying so much about finances and about your resources that you're building up almost like a volcano, right? The pressure is building up and building up, and the fear is rising, and everything is starting to have some kind of physical impact. And that's what the stillness is being asked for, is it's asking, where do you feel a pressure building up around the idea of lack, around the idea of, physical safety and security? So those are the areas we're going to be looking at as far as, what are we being asked for with stillness, and how are we going to be able to lean into this and surrender into these moments when they come up. And that leads us to, how can relaxation open a pathway from tension? So this perceived threat that we have with the Five of Coins is creating physical tension. It is creating a physical reaction to what is going on. And now we're looking at, how do we relax into that? Because it can be very, very difficult to know that sometimes when there's a sense of urgency, a sense of stress, a sense of danger, that sometimes the best way that we can do that is to relax into it. And here we have the Emperor. So relaxing in this sense, with the Emperor being, first of all, a major arcana card. So here we're looking at, this is a universal life lesson. And what it's asking is, when we create safe spaces, right? When we create boundaries between us and the outside world, when we're able to identify our limitations and really start to live from this perspective of, we have the power, we have the capacity to create the space that we need to live in, that allows us to relax a little bit, because then we become less reliant on other people. We become less reliant on external resources and external supports. They are important in some areas of our lives to be able to be willing to receive, right? But what we're looking at right now is, we're looking at how the Five of Coins is creating a story within our head that is now being embodied of, being afraid and having to live in this kind of like go, 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 so that we can get mentality. And the Emperor is coming and saying, hey, 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 wait a minute. Let's put some boundaries around where we're going to allow that to come in, because a lot of times the messages that are built up around this are coming from something external, are coming from, maybe the people that we're at work with, who might have also similar problems. And so as the conversations go on about, oh, I have this big bill to pay, or, oh, I'm worried about my job security, it builds up the opposite of stillness. It builds up, more of the anxiety. And the Emperor is coming in and saying, how much of that outside world are you willing to bring home? Because that's what you need to do, is you need to be able to make a very, very firm boundary line between external stresses, external worries, and what is really going on in your home, so that when you're there, this idea of lack, this idea of insecurity may actually start to clarify and become less. And I think about myself and my situation when I was a teacher, right? I would bring all of that home, and I would be at work for the hours that I was, and then I would come home, and it was like I was 24/7 in my classroom, and I was planning for the kids, I was planning for the lessons, I was working on different things. And there was no moment of peace. There was no moment of pause. And that's what the Emperor is saying, is no matter what job you have, there is nothing that says that that job has to encompass your entire life. And so the best way for you to relax and to allow the pathway from that stress point to the relaxed, calm openness that stillness allows us to have, is by making sure that we have those very firm limits in place. Kind of like, where are you going to put up your picket fence so that people know that that's where they have to leave everything on the outside. And from there, we're going to go to, what energy is waiting to help soothe your nervous system. So again, stillness will trigger the nervous system for one reason or another. Now, sometimes it'll trigger it just because of being sitting for however long that you're sitting, but the stillness will trigger something that will activate the nervous system one way or the other, right? When I say trigger the nervous system, stillness can calm the nervous system as much as it can, you know, anxiety fill the nervous system. And so this is really what we're looking for, is what is the energy is waiting to help soothe the nervous system. So how, when we're, working through these worries and we're setting up boundaries, what is the energy that is waiting to help us on this journey? And it's really interesting that we have the Three of Swords, and I'll get a little bit more into why this card is interesting, but the energy that's here is the energy of grief. And it's interesting how grief here in this situation is coming in to soothe the nervous system, because one of the things that we do, that we fight so much, is grief. And I think it's because we see grief as this great big gut-wrenching, collapsing into sobs kind of idea, that grief has to be this overwhelming, all-consuming feeling or emotion that we go through. And so if there's any opportunity for grief to come in, we have to cut it off. We have to push it down. We have to hide away from it, because grief is very uncomfortable. And, there are moments where that is grief. The thing is when we have grief that is all consuming like that, there is no way to stop it, right? If you have a loved one that passes away, there is nothing that you can do that's going to stop that grief from coming out. You're not going to be able to swallow back the tears, or to, detach yourself enough to not allow that grief to have its moment. What this kind of grief is talking to, it's the lingering grief. It's the grief that society tells us, it makes you wrong if you still grieve over that. And the thing is when we open up to grief, we open up to understanding that we're vulnerable, to understanding that there are parts of us that do feel that sadness, that do feel that longing, that do feel that disconnect, and that's healthy. That's part of being who we are. I think about, for me, when I think about this type of grief, I think about every winter when we get the first snow and I have to go out and clear the driveway. My father, when I moved here, he was the one who would come out with his plow and he would plow the driveway and have it all clean. And then when he was done, he would come in and have like a cup of coffee and we would have a conversation, and then he'd be off again. And he's been gone for probably close to 20 years now. And every winter, every time we have that first snow, I get up and I wait and I think, "Ooh, I have that moment of how long until he comes out to do the driveway." And then I realize that he's gone. And there's that moment of sadness. And sometimes it's just a moment, and sometimes it hits a bit harder. But that's the grief that is looking for us to acknowledge, right? To sit in the stillness with those moments that are, I believe those are the moments we call bittersweet, because there's definitely a sting that comes with them, but at the same time you can smile through them because there is something that shows the love, right? Because grief only comes from places of love. Grief will never come unless love has been present, and to know that we have loved allows us to understand we can love again. And so the energy that we need to step into is grief, in the sense that grief is missed love. It is missed connection. And so when we step into those moments and allow ourselves to be there and be in the love that we're missing, is more so than being in the tears. So this is why I say that the Three of Swords coming up when it did is really interesting, because the next question that we're diving into is what grief may be waiting in the stillness. So we already know that the energy of grief is there waiting to embrace us in the stillness. And, but it's what kind of grief? And here we have the King of Pentacles, which I find is really interesting. I say pentacles or coins, right? So we started with the Five of Coins, and this idea that we're missing something, right? That we don't have all the resources. So isn't it interesting that now we have the King of Coins, who is coming in this idea of the grief that's waiting in the stillness. And what stillness is holding are the people that we have lost, are the connections that we have lost. So maybe this idea that we don't have enough, that we're not safe, that we're missing something, that the resources are missing, are coming from the people that we are missing, the connections that we are missing. And this is on a physical level. And again, I'll go back to the idea of money, right? That we can open our bank accounts and look, oh, I have $1,000 in my bank account. And no, I've got like $1,000 that I can spend, and I can exchange these ones and zeros of data points for an actual, deck of tarot cards or cup of tea, right? So we can exchange that for things. And this is the same kind of thing. With the king, we're looking at the root and the grounding foundations that make us the people that we can be when we go out into the world. And so when we're ready to go out, maybe there is something that's missing as far as our structure, as far as our foundation that comes from, maybe a younger time in our lives. And it's important for us to remember that, when we sit in that stillness, we can really spend the time that we need reconnecting with the essence of what might be missing so that we can find where it actually is in who we are nowadays, in what we're doing nowadays, and in the way that we are embracing our physical life. So then that leads us to the final card, which asks, how can you begin to rewrite the story you have around stillness? And so it's almost like we have like these bookends, right? Where we have the Five of Pentacles and then the King of Pentacles, who are bookending the Emperor and the Three of Swords. So it's almost like this idea that all of our limitations, all of our boundaries, all of our grief and emotion is all being contained in the physicalness that is us, right? So our body, what is our body lacking, right? How much stillness does our body actually need for it to relax and to function? And then how much do we actually ground into what our body is telling us is what we need to be able to move into the world and to be able to, calm the nervous system and allow ourselves to know when it's time to step back and when it's time to move forward. And the fact that we had, the Three of Swords, which is a very emotional based card in the sense that it's about grief. But now when we're looking at how to rewrite the story, we're not using a sword card. We're not using a communication card. We're using a heart card, right? We have the Ace of Cups that is saying the best way to begin rewriting your story you have around stillness is to allow yourself to feel what stillness means to you. Right? Take that challenge that I took when I first started that program and sit in stillness for 5 seconds, for 10 seconds, and notice what you're feeling. Notice what your body is doing. Notice what your mind is doing. And when you're noticing what your mind is doing, notice how you're feeling when your mind is doing what it's doing. Because the best way for you to rewrite the story around stillness is to start by feeling safe, is to start by feeling the relaxation that comes when you give just a couple seconds of stillness to your body, to understand that there is a flow to how stillness will go. Stillness will give you a moment of utter peace within maybe 10 minutes of absolute chaos. And that's what you're looking for, is you're looking for that flow. And the moment you understand what I mean by the flow, that's when you're really going to start to understand how stillness works for you. Because the thing is the other thing we need to rewrite, and we need to start at the beginning, is we need to explore and experiment how we fit in the container that is defined as stillness. Because as water has no shape, it has no form unless it's forced into a form. And the only way you can force it into a form is usually by heating it up or freezing it. And so it's very important to understand that your relationship, your journey, your experience with stillness that you're going to surrender into, if you're open to it, willing and ready, is the understanding that stillness is going to be different in every single moment. And it'll be just like that river we talked about earlier, where it may appear very calm and still on the surface, but there's a lot of stuff going on underneath. And what is going on underneath is all what you're allowing, what you're fighting, what you need to surrender into. And it's always going to be different. right? There's a saying that says you never walk into the same river twice. This is the same thing. You will never encounter stillness in the same way twice. So, as a quick summary, we have one major arcana card, which is saying that the important thing to remember around stillness and your relationship with stillness is that it's you that has to set the boundaries. It's you that has to be able to make sure that there's a clear divide between your inner ecosystem and the outer crazy chaos that is the world. We have one sword and we have one cup. Both of them are under the number 5, meaning that these are just the beginning, right? So what we're looking at right now is we're looking at really starting to engage and have an honest and open conversation with what stillness is, what it can be, and what you want to get out of it in your life. And then we have 2 coin cards, which is saying that a lot of this is going to be grounded in a physical practice. The 5, of course, is the midpoint of the journey, meaning that your first experience with stillness is going to determine if you're ready to move forward or if you need to spend more time just practicing and playing and looking at what it is. And then the king is the one that's really going to ground all of this into a physically embodied practice. So I hope you enjoyed this reading, and I hope that there was something in it that landed for you. In the meantime, I really wish you all the best, and I will see you around the webs. Take care.